The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Sergeant Major Lewis rounded the corner of the training yard at Fort Adams, a sprawling military base tucked in the rolling hills of Virginia. The air smelled of wet grass, dust, and gunpowder, a scent that soldiers would carry with them for a lifetime. But today something felt different. Attention hummed quietly under the usual clatter of boots and shouted orders. In the middle of the formation stood a young recruit no one had seen before. She wasn't tall, and her uniform seemed almost too big for her lean frame. Her helmet sat awkwardly on her head, and the most unusual thing about her was that her vest bore no name. No patch, no tag, nothing. Just a blank space where her identity should have been. "Who's she?" whispered Private Jenkins to his buddy. He smirked, nudging him with his elbow. "No idea. Probably a mistake," his friend replied. But there was a hint of ridicule in his tone. The recruit didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, eyes forward, chin up, as if she didn't even hear them. Yet the whispering followed her like shadows in the sun. "Hey, Ghost Vest," someone muttered under their breath. The nickname caught on. By lunchtime, half the squad was laughing whenever she passed, tossing jokes about her invisible identity and whether she'd even be able to survive basic training. Some veterans shook their heads, muttering about recruits who couldn't take the heat, but she didn't respond, didn't even blink. She only moved faster, ran harder, and stayed later than anyone else in the training yard. Her name was Lieutenant Hannah Cortez, but no one knew it yet. And for now, in the eyes of the base, she was just the blank vest recruit. Hannah's journey to Fort Adams had not been ordinary. She had grown up in a small town in rural North Carolina, where she had watched her older brother enlist at 18 and come home broken from a tour in Iraq. She had promised herself she would be different. Not reckless with her emotions, and never anyone's second guess. But life had a way of testing resolve in ways no one expected. Hannah had faced doors slammed in her face for years. In high school, she had tried to join the ROTC and was told girls like her weren't built for combat. In college, she had tried for an internship with a federal security agency and was laughed out of the room. Even at home, she often heard her father say, "Hannah, you're strong, but this world, it's going to test you harder than you know." And yet here she was, standing in formation while every smirk, every whisper, tried to chip away at her resolve. The first test came sooner than anyone expected. Captain Daniels, a strict woman with a reputation for breaking recruits in half, called her up in front of the entire squad. "Blank vest," Daniels barked, scanning her. "You're assigned to the obstacle course. Time yourself. Show us what you've got." The squad snickered, pointing out impossible angles, expecting her to falter. "Watch this," whispered Private Hall. "She'll trip on the first rope." Hannah didn't move her lips. She didn't answer. She simply ran. The ropes climbed under her fingers like water slipping through a jar. Walls that had forced seasoned recruits to struggle seemed to melt beneath her determination. Every leap, every sprint was precise, clean, unwavering. The clock ticked, the whistle blew, and Hannah crossed the finish line. Not first, but without a single misstep. The squad stared, mouths agape. Some whispered apologies. Others stared, suspicious of how quietly she had exceeded expectations. But the murmurs were short-lived. Captain Daniels merely raised an eyebrow and moved on to the next recruit, leaving Hannah in the shadows of doubt and whispered speculation. That night, Hannah sat alone in the barracks, helmet still in hand. She traced her fingers over the blank space on her vest, feeling the weight of anonymity more than the fabric itself. No one knew her name. No one knew her story. And yet, she felt a strange sense of liberation in that emptiness. It was easier to move unseen, easier to learn, easier to prepare for the moment when people would have to take her seriously. But the moment came faster than she expected. 3 weeks later, the squad was sent on a training exercise in the outskirts of town, an abandoned suburb that had been converted into a mock battlefield. The mission? Infiltrate, secure, and extract a high-value target while avoiding simulated enemy fire. Hannah was paired with 2 other recruits, both of whom still looked at her like she was a ghost. "A mistake, a joke waiting to happen. Try not to slow us down," one muttered as they moved into position. Hannah didn't respond. She had learned early that words were weapons too, and she didn't need them when she had action on her side. The exercise began. Simulated gunfire echoed through the empty streets. Broken windows lined the houses. their glass glittering like dangerous crystals in the fading sun. Hannah led the team through the shadows, moving silently, calculating every step. Her partner stumbled, argued, almost walked into enemy fire. But she guided them wordlessly like a phantom pulling them through a gauntlet. And then, at the final checkpoint, the twist came. The instructor's voice crackled over the radio. Target acquired. Repeat, target acquired. The two recruits froze. They had failed. But Hannah, the recruit with no name on her vest, pressed forward alone. She darted into the building, identified the target, and neutralized the simulated threat with precision that left everyone, especially her mocking squad, speechless. That night, around the campfire, her teammates could no longer hide it. Whispers had shifted from mockery to awe. "Who is she?" one asked. Another simply shook their head, realizing they had been blind to her talent. Hannah didn't speak. She let the blank space on her vest do the talking. It was a small victory, but the first of many. And as the fire flickered against her determined face, she knew this was only the beginning. The world would soon learn her name. But for now, it remained a secret, hidden beneath the armor and the silence, until the enemy whispered it in fear. The morning fog clung to the trees around Fort Adams like a shroud, masking the roads, the training fields, even the distant hum of helicopters overhead. For most soldiers, it was just another day of drills. For Hannah Cortez, it was the day that would test everything she had built in the weeks since arriving. A test not of skill alone, but of courage, instincts, and the invisible armor of resolve she had woven from whispered doubts and silent sneers. Captain Daniels had called a meeting at dawn. The squad gathered in the hangar, the cold steel echoing every shuffle and cough. The briefing was short and sharp, words clipping through the chill air. "New assignment," Daniel said, her eyes scanning the group like a hawk searching for weakness. "A high-risk simulated hostage scenario. One building, multiple targets. Only one team can move in at a time. The objective: secure the hostages, neutralize the threat, survive." The recruits exchanged glances. Some tightened their grips on their rifles. Some rolled their eyes. But Hannah's hands remained calm. She was ready. Her team was hesitant, still haunted by the incident at the suburb mock battlefield. "We should go first," muttered one recruit, avoiding eye contact with Hannah. "No," Hannah said softly but firmly. Her voice carried a weight that startled them. "We move together, or not at all." They didn't argue. Not this time. The drive to the simulated target site was tense. The team sat in silence, the engine's roar the only sound, until the streets of the small abandoned town came into view. Broken mailboxes, rusted cars, and graffiti-streaked walls made the environment feel eerily real. It was a suburban battlefield, a place where danger could hide behind a refrigerator, under a staircase, or in a collapsed ceiling. Hannah's eyes scanned everything, the shadows, the lines of sight, the possible ambush points. She thought of the weeks of mockery, the whispered doubts, and how easily her presence had been dismissed. Those memories fueled her focus, sharpened her instincts. She wasn't just moving for herself anymore. She was moving for the respect she deserved, for the team who doubted her, and for the invisible name on her vest. The team approached the first building. Daniel's voice crackled over the radio, precise and cold. "Team, clear the front. Move slow, watch for traps. Hannah, your point." A few of her teammates stiffened. Point meant she was the first in, the most exposed, the most likely to fail. Hannah stepped forward. The mock concrete walls of the building loomed over her. Her heart beat steady. Not fast, not slow, just a controlled rhythm that matched her breath. She entered the doorway, scanning the interior. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in her ears. And then it happened. A figure lunged from the shadows. A simulation, yes, but realistic enough to make her jump. Without hesitation, Hannah moved, sliding behind cover, returning fire. Her movements precise, deliberate. Her teammates followed her lead, but it was her decision-making in the split seconds that made the difference. She guided them through rooms, around traps, through corridors that seemed to twist and turn endlessly. At one point, the floor beneath her groaned, threatening to collapse. A teammate froze. Hannah grabbed his arm, yanking him back just in time. Another room held two hostages, screaming and panicked. Hannah's voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. "Stay low. We're here. Move now." Her orders carried authority. No one hesitated. Not anymore. They cleared the building. They secured the hostages. But it wasn't enough. Daniel's voice came again, tighter now, hinting at real pressure. Secondary threat detected. Enemy team moving in from the north, fast. They've been tracking you. The team tensed. Hannah's heart beat a little faster now, not with fear, but with anticipation. This was the real test. This was where all the whispered doubts, the ghost vest jokes, the dismissals, would meet reality. The enemy team emerged from behind a wall of wrecked vehicles. Another squad of recruits, highly trained, aggressive, moving with purpose. Hold your positions, Hannah barked. She crouched behind a half-collapsed wall, eyes sweeping for vulnerabilities. Her teammates obeyed, trembling slightly, but she could see their confidence growing in her calm. The first shots rang out. The air exploded with noise, screams from simulated casualties. Ricochets of paint rounds and the smell of smoke filled the courtyard. Hannah's mind moved like a machine. She ducked, rolled, returned fire. She signaled her team with hand gestures, moving them in perfect coordination. But then, chaos. A teammate froze under pressure, a simulated enemy closing in. Hannah didn't hesitate. She pushed forward, pulling him to safety while returning fire with one hand, the other steadying him. Her body moved on instinct and training. Every action precise, but every second charged with raw courage. Minutes stretched like hours. The battle felt endless, but then the tide turned. Hannah noticed the enemy team was clustering, relying on their numbers. She took advantage, flanking them, leading a decisive strike that left the simulated threats incapacitated. Her team, once doubters, now moved with synchronized efficiency, following her commands, trusting her instincts. And in that moment, the whispered doubts that had haunted her since day one vanished like smoke in the wind. After the exercise, back at the base, Daniels called the team together. Silence hung in the air like a heavy curtain. She scanned the group, her eyes finally resting on Hannah. "Lieutenant Hannah Cortez," Daniels said slowly, emphasizing every syllable. "You moved the team through impossible conditions. You saved every simulated hostage. You proved something that even I doubted." The squad looked at her in stunned silence. The nickname Ghost Vest was gone. In its place was respect, hard-earned and undeniable. But Hannah didn't smile. Not yet, because this was just training, just a simulation. The real test, the one that would truly earn her name in fear, respect, and legend, was still ahead. And she knew it. She had the skills. She had the strength. And more than anything, she had the fire that came from being underestimated, mocked and ignored for far too long. The next time, there would be no simulations, and the enemy, whenever that day came, would whisper her name in fear. The weeks that followed Hannah's successful training exercise passed in a blur of drills, simulations, and endless preparation. But even as her reputation quietly began to spread through Fort Adams, she remained a ghost in the eyes of some of her squad. The whispers of respect had begun, yes, but a few still doubted. And the one thing Hannah knew about the military world, especially for a woman in combat, was this: respect was earned only in fire, and fear only by facing it head-on. That morning, the base received urgent news. A neighboring town, just 20 miles out, was under threat in a joint state simulation designed to mimic real-world insurgent tactics. The enemy had taken a building. Hostages were at risk, and the mission was dangerous, fast-paced, and high stakes. Captain Daniels assembled the squads, her eyes lingering on Hannah longer than usual. "You've proven yourself in training," Daniels said, her voice sharp. "But this is different. The terrain is unpredictable, the enemy is aggressive, and there's no margin for error. Hannah Cortez, point. Lead your team. Make sure we get everyone out alive." Hannah felt the weight of the order. Point meant she would be first in, exposed with the lives of her team and simulated hostages on her shoulders. But she didn't hesitate. She had prepared for this. She had dreamed of this moment every time someone mocked her vest, every time a whisper followed her through the barracks. Her team, once uncertain, now followed her silently, trusting the command in her tone, the steel in her gaze. The convoy drove through winding roads, past abandoned houses, burned-out vehicles, and the eerie quiet of a town left for simulations. The tension in the air was electric, almost tangible. The moment they arrived, Hannah assessed the building. It was 2 stories with broken windows on every side. The hostages were trapped on the second floor, and the enemy, Trained actors simulating insurgents were moving strategically, attempting to cut off entry points. Hannah signaled her team to split. She moved forward low and quiet, scanning for every angle. Her heart didn't race. Her hands were steady. But beneath the calm, a fire burned. This was more than a simulation. This was the proving ground where her identity, her very existence in this world of soldiers, would finally command recognition. The first shots rang out. Her team dove for cover as paint rounds splattered against walls. Hannah moved with precision, advancing through the chaos, neutralizing threats with measured force. She directed her teammates through rooms and hallways with hand signals and sharp instructions. Every move was calculated, every decision decisive. And then came the moment that would define her. A simulated hostage screamed. Hannah's eyes locked on the second-floor window where the enemy had cornered one of the civilians. She saw the angle, the potential escape route, and calculated the risk. Her team hesitated. One recruit froze, remembering their previous training failures. "Move," she commanded, voice cutting through the chaos. Without waiting, she leapt into action, climbing the fire escape with a speed and strength that left her team in awe. Bullets, paint rounds pounded around her. She reached the window, kicking it open, dragging the hostage inside. Her fingers burned, her muscles ached, but she didn't stop. She secured the civilian, covering their escape route while neutralizing two simulated insurgents who had pinned her down. Her team followed, inspired by her bravery, covering her advance, moving as one. They cleared the building, secured all hostages, and trapped the enemy in an isolated area. But what happened next was unexpected. The lead enemy operative, intentionally aggressive and a veteran of simulations, paused as Hannah approached. He had underestimated her, as everyone else had. And now, seeing her stance, the calm intensity in her eyes, the unwavering courage in her every move, he faltered. For the first time, he spoke her name. "Hannah Cortez," he whispered, disbelief etched into his face. It was the first time anyone outside her unit had uttered her full name in fear, respect, and awe. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a nickname. It was her identity, her presence, her undeniable strength. The words hung in the air like smoke from a battle, quiet but impossible to ignore. Her team froze for a split second, and then the realization hit. They weren't just following Hannah Cortez. They were witnessing a soldier who had transcended every doubt, every insult, every whisper of mockery that had clung to her since day one. As the simulation ended, the instructor's voice echoed across the town. "Outstanding performance. All objectives complete. Every life saved. Threat neutralized. Hannah Cortez, your leadership and skill were exemplary." Hannah's chest heaved, not with relief, but with the quiet satisfaction of vindication. She didn't need cheers. She didn't need accolades. The fear and respect in her enemy's voice were enough. That evening, back at Fort Adams, the atmosphere had shifted. Where there had once been whispers of doubt, there were now murmurs of awe. Veterans who had scoffed at the idea of a female recruit now sought her advice, studied her tactics, and respected her judgment. And yet, Hannah remained modest. She cleaned her equipment silently, aware that respect was earned not in words but in action. She thought of her father's warning, of every door slammed in her face, every doubt cast in her direction. Every moment had led her to this. Her name whispered, not as a joke, but in fear. But the true test, the one that would cement her legend, was still to come. This simulation had proven her skill, her courage, her ability to lead. But real danger, the kind that left no room for second chances, was approaching. Hannah felt it deep in her bones. She had survived mockery, drills, and simulations. She had earned her name, and now she would face the ultimate challenge, one where her courage, her leadership, and her sacrifice would be tested against something real, dangerous, and unforgiving. The night fell over Fort Adams, quiet and almost peaceful, but Hannah lay awake, thinking of the next day, the next mission, the next enemy who would underestimate her. She touched the blank spot where her name had once been on her vest and smiled faintly. Not for long, she knew. The enemy would come. And when they did, they would whisper her name in fear. The dawn broke over Fort Adams with a gray chill, the kind of morning that seeps into your bones and whispers that today could change everything. Hannah stood at the edge of the training yard, her vest now complete with her name patch stitched neatly across the chest. Hannah Cortez. Yet she hardly noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the distant ridge where intelligence reported a live exercise had turned into a real threat. A rogue group had breached the perimeter of a neighboring town. This was no simulation. No paint rounds, no instructors' whistles, no scripted scenarios. Lives could be at stake. And Hannah knew, deep down, that this mission would demand everything she had. Her team approached quietly, the quiet before the storm hanging heavy in the air. They no longer whispered doubts. They followed her without hesitation. Every member of her squad had watched her rise from the ghost vest recruit to a leader who could make split-second decisions under the highest pressure. Today, that training and resilience would be tested beyond anything they had imagined. Captain Daniel's voice came over the comms, steady but tight. "Hannah, you lead the entry. Secure the hostages, neutralize the threat, and get everyone out safe. You know the stakes." Hannah nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She didn't flinch. She couldn't, not now, not ever. The team moved in silence, navigating broken streets, shattered glass crunching under boots. The rogue group had barricaded themselves in a small municipal building. Windows were shattered, doors reinforced with stolen steel panels. Hannah approached first, moving like a shadow, her body low, her eyes scanning every movement. The first shot rang out. Paint this time had been replaced with live simulation rounds. Blunt projectiles meant to replicate real danger, but close enough to sting, close enough to make your heart jump. Hannah didn't hesitate. She signaled, moved, advanced. Her team followed, synchronized perfectly, each step a dance of trust and courage. Inside, chaos erupted. Hostages screamed. The rogue operators fired from concealed positions, but Hannah was everywhere at once, weaving through danger, covering her team, guiding them with precision. She neutralized threats with minimal force, her calm authority cutting through panic like a blade. One operative cornered her teammate, raising a weapon. Hannah didn't think. She acted. She intercepted, disarming him, saving her teammate, and simultaneously creating a path to the hostages. The enemy froze, their confidence faltering in the face of someone they had dismissed, underestimated, and mocked. Then came the moment that would etch her name into memory. The lead operative, the one in charge, turned toward her. His face hardened in disbelief. He had tracked her before, studied reports, assumed she would be no different than the others. A recruit who couldn't survive the first real test. "Cortez," he spat, disbelief trembling in his voice. The words were almost an admission, almost an apology, almost fear. Hannah's heart didn't race. She didn't smile. She simply advanced, calm, unwavering, her presence radiating authority and power. Every move she made reinforced the truth the rogue had just realized. She was not just another soldier. She was the soldier who could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Every room cleared, every hostage secured, every rogue neutralized. The operation was over, but the silence afterward was deafening. Hannah stood at the entrance of the building, her team surrounding her, breathing heavily, hearts pounding. They looked at her now, not just with respect, but with awe. Captain Daniels approached, her usually stern expression softened by pride. She placed a hand on Hannah's shoulder, the gesture small but heavy with meaning. "You earned this, Lieutenant," Daniel said quietly. "Everyone who doubted you will remember your name now." "And I mean everyone." Hannah's gaze swept over her team. She saw the pride, the recognition, the awe. She saw veterans who had mocked her vest, young recruits who had whispered doubts, and she realized that the true victory wasn't in completing the mission. It wasn't in neutralizing the threat or saving the hostages. The victory was in transformation, in respect earned, in a name no longer whispered in uncertainty, but in fear and admiration. The rogue operative from earlier, now in custody, refused to meet her eyes. But Hannah knew. Deep down she had seen it, the fear in his voice when he first uttered her name. That fear was not just about the mission, it was about acknowledging a soldier who had proven impossible to ignore. That evening, back at Fort Adams, the base felt different. The laughter, the whispers, the jokes, they were gone. Hannah walked past her peers, past her instructors, past every veteran who had once doubted her. Her chest lifted, her gaze steady. She didn't need acknowledgement, but she had it anyway. She paused near the training yard, looking out at the horizon. The wind brushed her face, carrying a sense of triumph and quiet reflection. She thought of her small hometown in North Carolina, of her father's warnings, of every door that had closed on her. Every insult, every doubt, every moment of being underestimated, they had built her into the soldier she was, and now they would remember her, not as the recruit with no name, not as the ghost vest, but as Lieutenant Hannah Cortez, the soldier who moved through fear, who rose above mockery and whose name would one day be whispered, not in doubt, not in scorn, but in reverence and fear, because she had earned it. Every drop of sweat, every bruise, every silent moment of determination had led to this. She had faced every challenge, every threat, every whisper of doubt, and turned it into her own legend. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the base, Hannah knew one thing. The world had learned her name, and it would never forget it.